your environment and the exposure to those things is powerful. And you got to watch it, you got to protect it, and you have to curate it yourself. And I tell people all the time, like, even if you can't curate it with your immediate circle, you can curate it mentally through the type of social media content that you take in, through the podcast that you listen to.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the Fast Forward Podcast. As I mentioned before, I'm really excited about this month's topic because it is a chance for me to share some voices with you, some of whom you may have heard of, some of whom you may not be as familiar with, but I personally enjoy the way they show up in the world, and I wanted you to see them as well. So today I have my good friend Tariq Muhammad with us. I'm really excited about this conversation. He and we've shared wisdom now over the course of 3 years. And
Yeah,
so as soon as I thought about this topic, I was like, he gotta be on here. Y'all gotta hear his story. So without further ado, Tariq, please introduce yourself and let us know at least one fun fact, but just tell us about you so the world can know who you are.
for sure, for sure. So, okay, first off, thank you all for having me on the show. For sure, a lot of love in the relationship. Otherwise I wouldn't be doing this on the Friday, but I appreciate it. Anytime you ask me to do something, I'm there for you because I appreciate everything that you've done. But what's up, everyone? My name is Tariq Muhammad. I like to start a little bit about who I am personally. So I was born in Southern California in a pretty city called Pasadena. If those of you that have not heard of it, if you heard of the Tournament of Roses, the Rose Parade, that's where Pasadena actually is. So grew up in Southern California. I'm a SoCal kid at heart. I love beaches, palm trees, sunshine. Played a lot of sports and stuff growing up out there. Moved around a lot in Southern California too. So one of the things I always like to share about my personal background is that I have the privilege of growing up in a two-parent household. So my mom and dad are still married to this day. I think they came up on 43, 34 years anniversary or something like that. And it's also their birthday in January. So I got to take everybody out this weekend for their dinner. But I share that my parents are from East Orange, New Jersey, and they moved out to Southern California shortly after graduation to build a better life. Those of you from East Orange and North, you know what I'm talking about, that's out there. But we moved around a lot in Southern California to always get to better neighborhoods that were conducive for my upbringing. So I always appreciate the sacrifices that my parents made for me. With that being said, when I was 11 years old, we also moved from Southern California across the country to Georgia, to Atlanta, when the economy of Southern California didn't become great. And, when my parents lost their job, we had to make some things that was different. And I remember that day like it was yesterday. Came home from riding my bike with my friends, and the U-Haul was out front, and we packed everything up, and they took me kicking and screaming because I surely did not want to leave. But I guess you an 11-year-old young little boy, you don't have a lot of say so on where your family gonna go at that particular point in time. But started over in Atlanta, went to middle school and high school here in Metro Atlanta, Georgia, and ended up going down to Georgia Southern University. I was blessed enough to play sports, and football was a sport that I was gifted in, and went down there and played ball for several years before graduating with my marketing degree and getting out of there. Some other things about me personally is I have a younger sister. She has her doctrines in psychology, so I lean on her for personal advice. She leans on me for some of the professional advice. The things I always like to share too is that I'm a proud girl dad. So I have a 16-year-old young lady is what I like to call her now because she's getting into those stages long past my little girl. But she keeps me busy with volleyball and running her around. She likes to thrift too, so going around the thrift stores and things of that nature. But she is the light of my life for sure, and the reason behind everything that I do. So I always like to share with people my why, and the question that I always ask people is, what keeps you driven? Like when things seem darkest and you feel like the world is against you, what makes you get up and keeps you going? And number one is my daughter for me, making sure that I show up for her as a father and making sure that she has a life that's conducive for growth. Number two for me is my parents, making sure that I'm the best version of myself each and every day to honor all the sacrifices that they made for me. And the third thing is my legacy. So how I show up in the world and how I show up for other people truly matters to me. I want my name to mean something when I leave this place. So those are the things that drive me personally. Professionally, I am a lot of things. So I am a leader. I am an investor. I'm a learner. So professionally as a company, I work for a Fortune 25 telecommunications company. I'm just going to leave it at that. People can take their guess as to which one that I work for, but my title there is Senior Director of Customer Success, specifically loyalty over there. So I've been with that company for 18 years, and I truly enjoy everything that I do day in and day out. I talk to many people, in this coaching world and this professional development world, and not many people say that they enjoy what they do. I truly enjoy what I do, to where when I come to work every day, it doesn't feel like work. I enjoy coaching. I get to coach people every day and invest into the development of others, for sure. Outside of work, I do investing into the stock market. I invest into real estate, both domestically and internationally, and also in the franchise game too. So, just about continuing to build wealth and help us all, close this wealth gap that we see here in our country overall. But it's also about continue to reach new heights and learn different things. So, that's who I am on the professional side of things too. But I like to balance in both. That's me in a nutshell.
I was I'm like, I ain't about to say nothing. I'm about to just let this man go because I knew I'm like the resume. The resume looking like a CVS receipt. So we just gonna leave it at that. It ain't no joke. Y'all know I don't bring on no chumps on this podcast. But I'm happy that you explained in such detail, right? Especially starting with your upbringing, because I think for a lot of people, when they think of black men, and this is even in the community, they think it either that the good times either end at childhood, right? So maybe you had this picturesque childhood and then your adult life is just struggle, or they think you had this horrible childhood and so you didn't really start experiencing a good life until you grew up. And so for you, you've been able to leverage the positive environments and experiences from your upbringing to then scale that in adulthood, the same way people would scale their business. A couple things stood out. So, I gotta I'm gonna pick through this because
Yeah.
it's so important. The importance of seeing the concept of family model is so important. And, your family experienced multiple cross country moves. I understand that because I done moved across country about 2 or 3 times myself, but that chase of a better life. So
Mhm.
I feel like migration is such an integral part of the Black American story, in particular, of families being able to uproot themselves, move someplace. And oftentimes we don't even get the benefit of being able to stay static and stationary once we get somewhere. Like, usually we got to move around then, like your family did.
Mhm.
How do you think your parents were able to cultivate a sense of togetherness and groundedness for you and your sister?
Yes, it's a good question, but one thing that I can say about my parents is that they are tight. They're the thick as thieves, been a dead, husband and wife, and you don't see. Well, I didn't experience any rifts between them growing up. Like how my mom felt about if it was outside of our household, how my mom felt about something was how my dad gonna feel about something. How my dad felt about something is how my mom going to feel about something, and their sentiments were the same towards me. It's almost like I'm gonna tell you what you need to hear, but it's gonna be behind closed doors within the
Hmm.
family. But outside, we are all one unit, one sticky place. Even when it came to things in school. I remember experiences in high school where I was getting picked on by a principal. The principal always tried to threaten you. Well, let me call your parents. I'm like, you can call my parents. In my head, I'm like, it's probably gonna go well for you, but you can call my parents. And I remember coming down to the office after they called, because he called my parents, called me down to the office to come to class, and my dad was standing outside the office, pacing back and forth. He was like, yeah, I just had to step outside the office because I didn't want to knock nobody out in there. It was like, and then my mom was in the office talking to him. And let's just say that conversation didn't go the way the principal thought it was going to go, but he left me alone from that particular point on. But I say all that to say that my family is tight, my family is close. And they've always, while they might not have always talked about it, they always shown through action and behavior what it means to have loyalty and to be a tight knit family overall with principles and values. I learned by watching them, not from a whole lot of things that they told me, but I always think actions are louder than words anyway. And like I said, I always use the word privilege, and that's a strong word because that is a privilege. Not as we all know in our community, there is a lower percentage of people that grow up in two-parent households
Yes.
overall. So for me, I always like to share that. It's also led me to have stronger conversations, share experiences with my friends and with coworkers and employees that didn't grow up in that household through different types of situations, because I was able to learn from both the mother and the father. It takes me back to the situation when the whole George Floyd thing happened. And every company had George Floyd initiatives, and they want all your black leaders to come on and talk to the employees about it, which we were proud to do. But, one thing that I always used to share is that I never got into those situations because I had a father that prepared me for what law enforcement can and cannot do since I was a young boy, because he went through it growing up in East Orange, New Jersey. And he taught me at a young age, like, a badge gives them the legal right to do anything that they want to do, especially for somebody that looked like you. And he was like, so you stay out the law's way, but if you have to get into the way, it's yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Put your pride and your ego to the side, because I've seen them make people disappear before growing up. He was like, your job at the end of the night is to get home. That's it. Everything else don't matter. But many of our black men do not have that male figure in their life with the level of maturity and the experience to tell them that, to survive through those type of situations. So to me, I felt like it was a responsibility for me to share those insights and my perspective and what I was taught on, to help out others that may not have had that same level of support when they was growing up. But yeah, that's insights of my family, mom and dad, and see what that brings.
I appreciate that, because the modeling that you talked about, it is really important. There are conversations that need to happen in-house, whether that's physically in your house, in-house in the community, in-house between generations of black men. And the thing that I regret so much about where the state of our community is that oftentimes those conversations have to happen on the internet. So
Mm,
an older black man could be putting game, right? Putting a younger black man up on game, like you just said. Now, me hearing that as a black woman, as a professional, there were parts I'm like, well, I don't know, but it's not for me. I'm not a black man. So your experience, yeah, I can hear it. I might have my own opinions, but I don't have to live that experience every day. And so I regret that there are conversations, there is game, there is knowledge, there is wisdom that younger black men especially have to hear,
hmm
and they don't get to hear it unfiltered, because as soon as somebody might type a tweet or a thread or a post, you gonna get hundreds, thousands, millions at times if it goes viral of other people. "Da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da," and it's like, no, that's what needs to happen between this group. It's not really for us. I appreciate you saying that, because that might have been the first time that other black men, especially younger black men, had somebody tell them that, right? That the priority is for you to make home. The priority is for you to have your own legacy, your family structure. Those are important conversations that normally happen in-house.
hmm
The next question that I have for you about that is, obviously as an adult, and especially being a girl dad, how have you cultivated intergenerational interdependence? Meaning, obviously you're a dad, so you are responsible for raising your child, but you're still your parents' child. So
hmm
you need them, then their wisdom, as obviously they didn't cross the bridge on parents and teenagers, thankfully. And so now they're giving you wisdom as a parent, but then also showing up as a grandparent. How do you build safe, thriving, interdependent relationships between the generations in your family?
For me, it's about encouraging open dialogue and really empowering my daughter in conversation, and I would say ingraining the lessons in her and the freedom in her that my parents gave me. And like I said, I grew up in an untraditional household. I grew up in a household where my parents were initially Islam, Muslim studies, Muslim religion. They came from Christian religions growing up. And give me a second, going somewhere with this, but like, they never forced religion on me. I remember my parents telling me, it's like, when you get old enough to decide your own religion, as a mature and as a man, that's the way that you're gonna go. Now, if you want to play with us now, you can do that and stuff too. And I say that to say that my parents provided me a lot of freedom in thought. And most people, we were all forced into religion. Like, your grandma went to church, your great great grandma went to church, you're gonna go to church. And my parents was like, no, we're gonna teach you to be independent and think for yourself. And because as an adult, there's gonna be some times you got to go through this life, and we always not gonna be there side by side. You got to be able to make your own decisions and pave your own path. And, that stuck with me a lot. They taught me just the golden and platinum rule: treat people how you want to be treated. In fact, treat people how they want to be treated. You do that at the end of the day, you're good to go. So those are lessons that I instill in my daughter, but I give my daughter that same power. When she has thoughts about things, I'll ask her, like, how do you feel about that? Tell me, use your words. Express to me how you feel about that. Oh, Dad, I want to do this. Why do I want to do this? Okay, why don't you want to do it? Like, I'm not going to be the parent that's going to say, no, you're going to do this because I said so and all. No, we're going to have a conversation about it. And I'm going to make you think critically and use your words as you continue to grow up, because my parents gave me that same leeway. And, that's what I instill in my daughter. And I think that's led to a level of maturity that even I didn't expect in terms of how she shows up in different platforms. Even with her playing sports and volleyball, I remember when she was in eighth grade playing volleyball, she comes to me in the car and she was like, yeah, our coach don't have no accountability. We can do whatever we want to. We don't get punished for it. She was like, it's just a lack of discipline. This is in eighth grade. I'm like, what? This is wild. I'm like, you want to say something back? Like, I don't really have nothing to say, but yep, that's it. Like, I can't. So I call her mom and I'm like, I'm like, this little girl she got a little bit of maturity, the smartness on it. So, it helps out a lot. And, we just try to expose her to as much as we can so that she can form her own experiences and form her own opinions. And again, encourage her to be a critical thinker and use her voice and use her mind regardless of her age. And that's important for when you talk about raising kids in this world to be successful and impactful adults within our.
That is so powerful because you hear all the time about the lack of critical thinking skills, and folks always try to put it on younger generations. But let me say this: some of y'all adults don't have no critical thinking skills either.
Right.
But we'll get off that.
That's another podcast.
I might do that for March. But honestly, it is really what people don't realize about critical thinking is that it is a skill that you build. It's a muscle. So just like you can't lift 250 pounds once a year, you would be much more effective lifting 30 every day, right? Or even 15 every day to get up to the 250, or even just to build that strength over time. It's the same thing with critical thinking. So one of the biggest factors of that, sorry, I gotta teach for a minute because this has been
Go
on my
ahead.
mind for a second. One of the biggest aspects of critical thinking that's so important that people miss is the ability to hear and process through counter arguments in order to then synthesize and or integrate information to develop your own final position. So I'll come and say, I think XYZ is right. I then need to hear, know, and understand people who are saying, no, that is not correct. I think this other thing. Then I need to say, okay, well, what are the merits of their argument? What's the merits of mine? And pick holes in my own argument. These are things that I remember doing as young as third and fourth grade, like in class, in school, teaching us to do this. And we kept having to learn and develop this skill over years and years and years. The fact that people are struggling with this right now is so fascinating to me because I'm like, but you like 56 though. So like what happened here?
That part is like, y'all
You
grown. Yeah, y'all got me by a decade and a half. Like, what do we? Like I said, a whole podcast.
No, you gotta come back. That's a podcast episode. That's an online learning module. That's a TV show, and maybe even a movie. It's a lot
Yeah.
of things because we have to get better with this because, like you said, our children are watching. She didn't come up with knowing that her coach didn't have accountability and there was no discipline on the team because she read that in one book somewhere. She sees accountability modeled with her parents. And so then she's able to see when it's not present in other situations and then take it to the next level to course correct her behavior because that's the other part that's missing. And let me say this, we on that. One of the things that has come up so much in the conversation about Black men in online spaces is the fact that there are a lot of voices and personalities who are able to hone in on intense emotions. So whether that's frustration, loneliness, anger, feeling disengaged with the world, feeling like life is unfair for you, because you are truly a person who obviously takes ownership of their life, right? You are, now I'm gonna get us back on track because that was like a that was an aside. I'm gonna swing this into the actual topic.
Yeah.
You are a Renaissance man. So you have a thriving career, you have built a thriving family structure, including co-parenting, which most people are not really nailing that one. And you have a thriving relationship with your parents and siblings. How have you cultivated this life through taking ownership of your life? Because that's the
Yeah.
struggle for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a struggle for sure. And I wouldn't say the one thing that it's an ongoing journey, right? Like that journey doesn't stop, and sometimes those things change. But for me, coming out of college and starting to become a mature adult that was ready to be a mature adult, it takes spending time with yourself and understanding what type of life do you really want, and what are the things that you value, and what does that look like? How do you bring those things to light each and every day? And like everybody has different passions and things that they have, but to me it's about how do you prioritize your values and how do you prioritize your passions to create the life that you want. And I think that as human beings, regardless of the race and the community that we come from, we don't spend a lot of time with ourselves to really identify those things until later on, when we might have less time within the world, or whatever that may be. Like I said, I don't think it's ever too late, but I was able to do it at a young age and say, you know what, health and personal fitness is important to me. I'm going to always find time to work out. Learning is important to me. I'm going to always find time to learn. Growth, from a personal perspective or from a wealth perspective, is important to me. I'm going to find ways to make it happen. And things that we care about and that we're truly passionate about, you find ways to fit it into your life. I don't care how large or how small it is. Like if somebody has very nice hair, like if a woman has very nice hair, they're going to be at a hair appointment every week, every other week.
Period.
That's not coming out the budget. You know what I'm
As
saying?
soon as you said that, I was like, yes.
Period. Yeah, it's not coming out the budget. You make time for that, and it's the same thing. We all have to spend time with us to figure out what do we truly value, what our true passions are, and you have to make time for those things and structure your life around those things. Sometimes it gets difficult, especially when you have kids come into play. It's like, man, Sid got all this volleyball stuff going in the afternoon. I need to get a gym workout in. Can't go in the afternoon anymore after work because something might come up that stops me from going. Guess what? I got to get up at 5:30, 6 o'clock now. Stuff like that is how do you make your priorities and really fit it in. And for me, I was fortunate enough to do that at a young age, but I think it was also because of the people that were around me, which is another thing that I talk about is one of the things that I learned that is critical to always sticks with me to this day is from a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. Y'all read that one. That's a must read to me. And what he talks about is becoming part of a community where the normal behavior of that community is your desired behavior. Because if you're around people that are thinking, acting, and behaving how you want to, it's easier for you to get into that mode, into that way. And I've been blessed to have a group of friends. I'm in a fraternity. Shout out to the Newps out there, KSI. My friends, my circle, and my brothers, they're all thriving from a family perspective. They all are about growth. They're about maturity. And when you're around those people, those what those conversations are, those what those behaviors are. And it leads and helps you guide yourself towards what it is that you already want as a whole. So I think I was just lucky to do that and to continue to learn and grow, to be able to prioritize those things in my life where I can make those things matter and show up how I want to show up in the world. And it's challenging at times, but I enjoy it. I enjoy the challenge. I enjoy being uncomfortable, and I enjoy the growing that comes along with it.
I love that so much because as soon as you said that quote, it painted a picture in my mind. I want to double click on that for the listeners because the normal behaviors of your group are your desired behaviors. The sequence of that sentence starts with other people, but how you will prioritize putting that quote into action is actually to reverse the sequence and start with understanding what are your desired behaviors.
Hmm.
And then you find groups that is the norm. And I think again, I just go back to online so much because we look at people and say, okay, I'm gonna do that. And it ends up pulling us in my head. I picture like Stretch Armstrong. I don't know. Look, we dating ourselves now, but that was that little kid where he had like all these arms and he was stretching like crazy, and then it would come back to the original shape, right? That perspective will burn you out. And especially, I think for men, because so much of men's validation comes from external tangibles. Like as a woman, beauty is usually the standard, but so much of that is not based on how much of something, if that makes any sense. But for men, when I see the way people judge men, it's like, how many cars do you have? How many girlfriends do you have? How much money? So how many commas we got going on? I heard Future song in my head. Way too many
Oh yeah,
commas.
and with that topic, that's so deep though. Like it even goes back rooted to how we are raised in our communities. I think about myself as a young kid coming up to middle school and high school, and we all want to fit into the popular crowd. And as men and as young boys, you got popular to like in 1 to 3 or 4 ways. A few of them. One is you a star athlete. Two is you got the girls. Three is you can dress. Four is you can fight. Them was the four things. If you could do one of those four things right there,
Hold on,
that
and not if you could do all four. Then it's like,
oh yeah, you was the man in school then if you could do those things. But if you think about that long term from a life value perspective of those four things, where is that really gonna get you long term? But
mm,
that is what we as young men in our community, a lot of times that's what the value is. Even when you listen to our music these days, and I like to listen to biographies and hear our entertainers talk about their life a lot. And I was
yeah.
listening to King Von, rest in peace, rest in
Mhm.
peace to peace to his family. And but I learned from these cats, and he was had an interview, and the guy asked him like, when did you turn into this person that you are today? And King Bob was very transparent. He was like, man, I used to be a kid in school getting straight A, going to class every day and stuff like that. But growing up in the south side of Chicago, he's like, when I got out of school, all my partners and all my homies, they was out there doing this. So that's who I was around. That was my environment. That's why I spent most of my time with. He's like, I can't tell you when the switch was, but that's the reason why it happened is because my environment and my circle, that's what they were doing. So it goes back to the previous topic that we were talking about. Your environment and the exposure to those things is powerful. And you got to watch it, you got to protect it, and you have to curate it yourself. And I tell people all the time, like, even if you can't curate it with your immediate circle, you can curate it mentally through the type of social media content that you take in, through the podcast that you listen to. I tell people, I listen to millionaires every day. And they're like, all your friends millionaires? I'm like, no, but it's a Millionaire Next Door podcast. I follow the EYL podcast. So I'm training my mind every day. So even if I'm not around it, it's in my mind every day. I'm like, so even if you can curate that environment for yourself, regardless of your circumstances of where you come from, but it matters, and it matters so much. But going back to those values that we have as men in our community, as our community period, that's a whole nother podcast in general. It takes work, for sure, and it takes awareness. Yeah.
It's so funny that you brought up King Von. So I lived in Chicago for a number of years.
Mhm.
And without divulging a lot about that situation, I probably need to do an episode where I talk about that part of my life. But anyway, I worked in social services, and a lot of my relationships on a personal level ended up introducing me to and giving me sight into that type of life. And I will remember being so fascinated. Actually, I got a chance to interview several people for my master's research then, because that research was talking about Black male career development in high schools in Chicago public schools. And some of the most brilliant businessmen I have ever met in my life to this day were street dudes.
Mhm.
And I remember interviewing some of these guys for my master's research and talking to them. And I was like, this man could run a Fortune 500 company easy. Like, I'm listening to the mindset. And of course, working in these environments, you like, some of these people ain't that smart. Like, damn, they just lucky. And I think about what you said about the four qualities. If we were to distill them down to emotions, those environments train you to either be aggressive and express anger, shallow, right, and emotionally detached because all you care about is looking good or just racking up notches on a belt, or detaching from your own pain tolerance and needs because as an athlete, your goal is to push through to get to the win by any means necessary. And so, how does that condition our to not self actualize and not embrace, I call it the totality of their humanity, even in youth, even as kids? And there are consequences to that. And I
For
think
sure.
we're seeing that play out now.
Yeah. And those consequences, other people are impacted by those consequences
Yes.
because, one thing that is a struggle with relationships between men and women is men's ability to express themselves and
Yeah.
express emotions. And we're taught growing up, our communities teach us That's not a good thing. You get called all types of names. I'm gonna keep it PG while we're on here. But when you start to express those emotions, but those trigger over into your relationship, now you got communication problems with your significant other, communication problems with your kids, and it, like you talked about, it impacts so much, in doing that too. So like it's important, but you gotta be able to look intrinsically. You got to be able to grow. I encourage people to go see a therapist if you can. Even if you don't think you need to go see a therapist, go see a therapist. I always tell people, because there's some things that it's in a safe space that allows you to express what it is that's on your heart, what's on your mind. Your friend circle, if you have a good friend circle, can help you do that too. But especially as Black men, a lot of times it feels, and I use that word intentionally, it feels like we live in a society that doesn't care about how we feel. So we have to find that safe space for us as Black men, intentionally, some way, somehow, and so that you don't hurt yourself, but also more importantly, that you don't end up hurting others, that you care about.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that part. 2 points I want to bring out with that is that there are different modalities of therapy. So I
Really.
think the most common one that mostly everyone thinks about is talk therapy, but there are many different types of therapy that could be a fit for your specific needs. And your therapist is just like a doctor or your barber or whoever. You have to find the right fit.
Mm,
So don't give up on the healing journey, right?
yeah.
Because you didn't necessarily find the right fit first and foremost, like right away. There have been times, and usually I change therapists because I end up relocating. I told you I moved a bunch. So I think I've had maybe like 4 or 5 therapists in my lifetime. And sometimes looking back on a past therapist, now that I have a new therapist in my new place, I'll be like, wow, that wasn't the best, but maybe it got me one step further on my journey. And therapy is a partnership. So sometimes my therapist, like, it just helps me to get it out to that person. The answers may still come from me because I still got to do my own work, but just being able to download all of that stuff out of my head by speaking it, sometimes that's helpful. There have been other times where the best thing that a therapist did for me is give me a formal diagnosis of something. So by talking to them and they like, wait, what happened? This. Okay, girl, that sounds like, and I was like, oh, really? It's a name for this? Wait, it's treatment options. So all of these things can be extremely helpful, and I think what you said about having a well-rounded community. So you have your healthcare professionals that includes doctors, therapists, dentists. Because let's say this, and I just saw something about this. Dental care, some of the issues you might be having might be because it's something going on in your mouth. Like our mouth is the gateway to everything from our nervous system, our brain health, muscular
Hmm.
health, like all kinds of stuff. So y'all, please don't forget about that part, but also having access to coaches, fitness trainers to be able to support you with building your body stamina. It could be yoga and other stretching exercises. Then you got your family, your friends, your loved ones, having mentors and sponsors in your professional life, having the right coworker circle. Like all of these things matter, and it does take time. Unfortunately, one area might be up, the other area might be frustrating, but the point is you kind of stay on it to make sure you can cultivate that well balanced, well rounded life. You take pride in mentoring other professionals to maximize their potential, which I think is such an important distinction. How did you build the capacity to reach around and reach back for others as you've been climbing yourself professionally?
One, it's understanding the people that were involved and helped me get to where I am today.
Mm,
And being grateful to them in a sense, right? And I remember when I got my first executive leadership position 5 years ago, and my mentor and boss at the time, he called me and said, "Congratulations," and he said, "I want to let you know that it's your duty and your responsibility to reach back and pull somebody else to get them where you are, so each one teach one, and that's the responsibility that comes along with it. That's one part of it. But the other part of it is also reflecting on my journey and getting here and understanding the struggles that I had trying to get to certain points at my point in time where I remember it was times where it was no help. It felt like nobody wanted to help me. Um, Help doesn't have to mean giving me something. It could be information, it can be access or whatever it is. And like, I'll give you a specific example. I just got done conducting interviews for an associate director position, and I got to get everybody feedback from it. And giving feedback to people that interview with me and don't get the job is extremely important to me. because the culture in my organization, not intentionally, is that people don't get feedback. Well, if you don't get feedback on what you did wrong, then how do you progress and get there? And I remember going through tons of interviews and I'm like, no feedback. Like, how do I get to the next step? So for me, it's about ensuring that other people don't have the same experiences that I had. You won't come through me and say that Tariq didn't help or Tariq didn't support or Tariq didn't provide some type of value for me, because that's where I truly feel gifted and blessed in what I'm able to do. That's why I say I love the work that I do, because I'm able to do that every single day. I get the biggest pride and joy from helping others achieve what it is. This year I've had two my previous leaders get promoted to executive leadership positions, and we all trying to push these more Black people in executive. So when we win in our company, we win. And I had two of my Black female leaders both got promoted to executive positions, and I'm like, man, I want to send them a bottle of wine, go out and celebrate with them. But that's where I find joy, is like to go back and coach and implement and invest into somebody else, and to see them achieve their goals and understand that I was a part of that journey and I had an impact. That's what I truly get fueled at. So I find time for it more than anything. And people always want to say, well, I know you're busy. I know you don't. I always make time, because that's the part of my life and my career that I enjoy the most. But even outside of my company, I'm a part of Urban League in Atlanta, and I do it there too. I'm part of the Economic Development Committee, the Professional Development Association. So helping people with resume building, helping people with interviewing, helping people with switching careers.
Yeah.
That's where I find the biggest joy at. And you hear the cliche statements of give back, giving back to others is where the real joy is. It's true. For me, it's absolutely true. That's when I feel, and I talked about legacy at the beginning of this, and that's when I feel like I'm truly living in that legacy and truly making an impact in my community and with my people, for sure. So again, make it a priority.
I love that. So a couple things I want to bring out with that. First of all, you can do that for people on whatever level you're on, right? So you're not worried about, I ain't got $1 million to give people. How can I help? Easy. Somebody call on you and just say, hey, can you tell me a little bit about how you do interviews well? That might only be 15 minutes to you, but that might set somebody on a positive trajectory for the rest of their career. You are giving people space, giving people feedback. It can happen in any number of ways. So for the listeners out there, just start where you are in the little part that you can influence. One thing I do want to ask you a follow up question about is, and I'm probably going to end up talking more about this because this is important for folks. So, that transition from an individual contributor to a people manager to executive leadership, we talk a lot, right? And there's a lot of information out there about how to go from IC to people manager. But I don't think folks always know some of the distinctions between how you have to show up as a people manager versus how you need to show up as an executive. Can you talk about some of the development you did, particularly as a Black man, to make that pivot in your career?
Yeah. When you start to, the further up you move in leadership position, the more it starts to become strategic, more it's tactical, the more your political and your social capital matters in a corporate environment. One is understanding the landscape of what got you here won't get you there. That's number one. Another thing that I understood is that I need to work on my executive presence and how I speak and how I communicate. And so for me, I grew up, like I said, came up in Atlanta, and one thing that happened to me when I moved to the South is that I adopted the Southern twang. When I was in high school, middle school, and when I got to college, me and all my boys sounded like T.I. We was talking, for sure. And it was one of my dad's biggest nightmares. But as I came out of college, I realized that, based on what I wanted, that's how it is. And it's funny because when we get back around each other, it all come back out again. We get to
Yeah,
watching football games, it sound
immediately.
completely different, immediately different. So, but I recognize that in my professional career that, okay, everybody that I see at that level has a certain level of executive presence, a certain level of cadence and pitch when they speak. So how do I get there? And I started to educate myself, reading books and listening to my mentors. Slow down when you talk and enunciate your words, because that matters when you get into an executive leadership position. Overall, how you communicate strategic messages and how you're able to motivate and inspire people actually matters when you get to that place in that spot. And I tell people, like, the corporate world, you got to understand that businesses are mostly not ran by us. Corporate America, again, it's 5,000 companies on the stock market. 7 of them are Black owned. I will say that again. 5,000 major companies on the stock market, 7 of them are Black owned. So the decision makers in these companies don't look like us. They only want people in executive leadership positions or higher that represent them. So I tell people that I mentor Black men, Black women. I get it. You want to show up, I'm not saying don't be unauthentic, but understand that if your brand and who you are is not something that they feel like represents the brand of the company, executive leadership is not the area that you're going to get to at the end of the day. And some people
That's
don't
all.
want,
Listen, you saw I got quiet because I'm
yeah,
like, okay.
yeah, put your feelings to the side. Understand that if this what you really want, because there's some things that you're going to have to change. And I'm not talking about cutting your hair. That's none of that stuff really matters depending on which company that you're in, but I'm talking about the way that you show up and communicate. Because in executive leadership role, you have to be able to communicate in a way where everybody, regardless of what they look like,
Yes.
their background, their position, their department, can understand what it is that you're saying. And
So
to
you
me,
know
that's a
what? Hold on
different.
one second.
Yeah.
Let's define exact because I already know it's
Yeah.
gonna be somebody. It might be 3 years from now. They go hit it. Nah, they will send it. Boop. Let me cut the foolishness off right here. Executive presence, as we are speaking about it, is, as Tariq mentioned, communication. It is also the ability to motivate and engage a wide variety of skills, personalities, cultures, backgrounds, title levels, etc. It is also the ability to use discretion and leverage discretion as influence. And one of the biggest things I'll bring out, and I'll stop at this fourth one, it is the ability to be able to develop, interpret, and communicate strategy. So
Mhm.
you are no longer the person performing most of the tasks in a group. Your responsibility is to take the vision of people higher than you, translate that into an actionable strategy in your corner of the company, and then assign work appropriately. Delegate out tasks, set metrics, set goals, and then find ways to motivate people to hit those goals for whatever your little corner of the pie is.
Mhm.
That's it. That's what we mean by executive presence. So again, it is motivation and engagement, it's the communication, it is being able to be strategic, and it is able to leverage discretion as influence. All of that shows up in very particular ways in executive leadership, in part because most executive leadership, especially C suites, they are largely homogenous by both race and gender. But also, it is because most businesses, especially multinational companies, they have their norms so that they can easily get to the money and keep the money that they're making across cultures worldwide. That's just the simplest way to put it. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
I had to say
Uh,
that because people love misunderstanding stuff and getting foolish. So we gonna cut the foolishness.
yeah. I don't want to go deep into it, but the first response I usually give for people is, "So you mean to tell me I gotta fake it, act like something?" I'm like, "No, I didn't say that." But
At
I'm
all.
not going to coordinate. And nobody said
At
that.
all. And but you know what's funny with that? I've had to tell people, I'm like, we have norms in our community too.
Hmm.
Like, there are ways that I can't show up as a Black woman to other Black women before they'll be like, oh, she faking. Right.
Hmm.
So the idea of cultural norms, that is normal in every facet of life. It is just that, again, there tends to be a certain level of homogeneity in corporate spaces, and it's typically not built for us. But you can still thrive. You still can. That's where mentorship and sponsorship is so important. All right, let's get to this
Absolutely.
last thing. I gotta bring you back on. We can talk about that all day. This is important. All right, so last question. What is your greatest failure and how has it changed you for the better?
Well, that's a tough question, and it's even tougher because I don't like to use the word failure. I call them learning lessons for the most
Mm,
part. But one that sticks out to me was one that I made when I was a teenager when I was working, and I won't say what store where I was working at. It was a sporting goods store though, and I was terminated from that store from getting a hookup, being Jameis Winston. As an employee of that store. But needless to say, there was a floor manager that I had there and learned that, when I was going to get clothes to get everything, he was like, well, come to my lane. I got you. I didn't know what he meant till I went through the lane. I'm like, oh, okay. I tried to do it a second time. And the funny part about it, Kayla, is like me and my boys, we was planning to go like Atlanta Falcons game. I'm like, I got the gear. I got the hat. Don't worry about it. I'm going to get all the jerseys and everything. Go through the lane, get everything rang out. As soon as I tried to walk through the door, they had a secret security, got me, took me straight to the back of the store. And I'm like, oh, man. But you're talking about heart fell through the floor, during that time, because at this time, I'm a junior in high school. I'm a football star. I got scholarships on the line, people looking at me. And, you back there in that room, sitting in there with true law enforcement looking at you, and everything flashes before you. As a high school, you're like, man, everything from what your parents gonna think, to I'm about to get kicked off the team, to I'm not gonna be able to go to college.
Hmm.
Everything flashes me. And cops talk that talk too when you in there too. So they just
Oh,
add
of
to it.
course. They
They
listen.
just,
They escalating it now.
oh
You
yeah,
done
for
turned
sure.
into Pablo Escobar. Like
Right, right.
you running a ring, and it's like, sir, but it literally was a hat and a jersey though. Like,
Yeah, right. So I say, sit in that room, but I'll tell you this, I was able to walk out of there because I wasn't the one that they were really after. For
mm,
me, they terminated me and asked me to pay back and, fees and stuff like that too. But they, in no situation, what I learned is that they've been doing these investigations for a while. They were like, we already know you ain't the main person. It's like in real life, they want the kingpin. They don't want you little dudes out there too.
really,
Yeah, they was like, we just gonna fire you and let you go ahead and do your business. But when you're sitting in that seat, and that's something small compared to what some of my friends have been doing, we know some people that's
yeah,
minor stuff. But coming
yeah,
out of there, walking up out of that store in daylight, and my parents coming to get me, and it was a breath of relief. And it was something that shocked the system, because you realize in that moment everything that you can lose. So that was a failure in decision making. But I look at it as a learning lesson and a blessing, because it didn't take away my health. It didn't take away my freedom. And most importantly, it didn't take away my life.
yeah.
So what I learned from that, to never make that same mistake again. I was able to go back to my regular life. And the funny part about it was that I told y'all, my parents are from East Orange, and my dad grew up doing experiencing everything underneath the sun. Hearing the stories about that, so you're thinking, man, my parents are about to beat me down when I come out of here.
Oh, of course.
And
Yeah,
my mom was
because
cool
we
about
raised you to
it.
do that. Yeah.
Right, right. But my mom was cool about it. Of course, she had some words and some lessons for me. But my dad was so chill. He was like, he was like, whatever. And I look back at him, like, my dad was probably like, man, out of all the stuff I did when I was little, if this is what he was like, man, that's small
That's
stuff.
light work.
Yeah, that's light work. So I got it. I was like, okay, this is cool, not so bad. But I still learned my lesson. And like I said, it was a life lesson that didn't take away my health, my freedom, or my life at that point in time. But that's one of the biggest mistakes and learning lessons that I've made in my life that changed my perspective and changed my critical thinking and decision making for the better moving forward from there.
Okay, so pardon thought, you shared so much wisdom about family, career, choices, youth development. What is the final thought you want to share with younger black men about how they can cultivate a life of which they can be proud?
Yeah, oh man, there's so many lessons I can give. I think the one thing that I would say is believe in yourself and whatever dreams and vision you want to accomplish. And it all starts right here. Everything. I don't care where you're from, what environment you came back in. If you believe that you can do something, it can happen. And a lot of times we come from environments that make us believe that because we're from this place, we can accomplish certain things. And I'll drop another book on y'all called The Secret. And The Secret, it's a secret that's not so secret, right? But it's all about how your thoughts and your mentality can form your reality. So my challenge to my black men, but also anybody, is take care of your mental state and
Hmm.
watch the way that you talk to yourself as you go forward, because you can speak things into reality for sure. The second thing that I would say is what we've talked about here too, is curate your environment based on what you want to accomplish and what you want to achieve. You hear the cliche statements of look at the 5 people you hang around the most, and that's probably going to be, that's true. That
That's
is
true.
true. So understand, spend that time with yourself, figure out what it is that you want to be, what type of life you want to live, and ask yourself, do the people around me, are they conducive to me getting what it is that I want and what I value? Not what they want, what they value. That's nothing. If it's not, change it up. And the last thing that I'll say is continue to learn and continue to invest in yourself for sure. That is an ever lifelong journey for sure. to learn to invest in yourself and stop caring about what they think and care about what you think more.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming, Tariq. I've been
For
waiting to
sure.
have this conversation. We've been talking about this for a minute. I just thank you so much. I think this is going to be amazing, especially again for the younger Black men who are going to hear this. I hope you all found as much value in this conversation as I did. Drop us some gems in the comments. What's the biggest thing that you learned from our conversation? And do you have any more questions for Tariq? Like, I'm gonna
Yeah,
definitely
reach
share
out.
with him. Yes, absolutely. Because I want people to hear from you more.
Cool. I'm glad to come back anytime, you need for sure. I enjoy the conversation, and enjoy giving back. But yeah, y'all reached out to me on LinkedIn. It's my regular name that's out there, no secret hashtags or nothing like that. But I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all have or provide any insights or help people out in any type of way too,
Yes.
for sure.
And he really mean that. He's
Yeah.
honestly one of the kindest, most giving people that I have ever met. That's why I wanted y'all to meet him. So of course, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And yeah, I'm gonna catch y'all on the next one. Bye.
Peace, y'all.